is so nice to see your bright, smiling faces this morning as we continue on this journey together. And our theme for the month of August is inclusion in action. And I like the theme because something that I have been doing in my own personal practice, and as I have the opportunity to speak, I've been offering this to the congregants, is that we move from theory into action. And so moving from practicing inclusion in action is right in alignment with what it is that I want to share with us this morning. Our theme for today, the specific theme for today is, who are we? And when I first saw that title, I thought of the song, Who Are You? By the musical group The Who. And the original, oh my God, it just popped out of my mind. CSI, the original CSI series. That was the theme song for the series. Who are you? And so that was where my mind went. And then I had to reread this. And this is, oh, who are we? So this is more of an inclusive. We have an opportunity to look at who I am, who you are. But we also have this opportunity to look at who we are. In our Science of Mind teachings, we recognize that we are emanations of the divine, and that each one of us is unique and at the same time unified through various experiences, identities, evidenced by the mere fact that we are all here together at this moment in time. And I think that's something we can just celebrate, that the unique characteristics, the unique qualities that each one of us brings into this life experience is all right here together at the same time. And according to my count, there are 30 participants. And I know there are more than 30 actual individuals, but there are 30 points that have signed on to be with us this morning. So I really appreciate that. So just think of, just in this small group, there are 30 unique individual expressions of God. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome that we can all share the same space together? I do invite us to take a moment now to call forward in our prayers the people in the communities that are surrounding Beirut and the country of Lebanon and all other places throughout the planet where devastation has taken place. And we lift those communities in prayer, knowing that in consciousness, we are affirming wholeness, and we're also affirming and declaring that all of their needs are met and that restoration is beginning right here and right now. And we know that in our prayer treatment, where there's the fire and the passion behind the treatment that we deliver, the affirmations that we utter, however it is that we express ourselves to the divine, we know that the demonstration is instantaneous. And so I'm declaring that the healing that is taking place in Beirut is instantaneously and demonstrating itself right here and right now. And so as we become clear about who we are, our unique one-of-a-kind self, our identities, our individual and collective experiences we bring into the world, all of this adds value to our inclusive lives. And the key here is that as we more fully show up and allow others to more fully show up as the emanations of God that they are, we really do create a world that works for everyone, which is the global vision of our Centers for Spiritual Living. In our Science of Mind textbook on page 347, paragraph 3, Dr. Holmes writes, our subjective mind is our mental emanation in universal subjectivity. That's the intellectual or the theory part, because Ernest can write in some highly intellectual expressions that he'll use. But then, much like in the teachings of the master teacher Jesus, he breaks it down in the same statement or in the same paragraph. And he says very simply that this is our individual use of mental law. So using mental law, we express our divine and unique qualities. When we are clear about being who we are, we stand in our power and we celebrate the identity of others as a gift that helps to foster inclusion. You know, we've been talking a lot about inclusion and diversity and calling forward those things that have been not so much buried in consciousness, but maybe overlooked a little bit in consciousness. This time, for such a time as this, we who are practitioners and students and teachers of new thought and of our science of mind, ancient wisdom principles, this is the time that we're being called forward to up-level the consciousness of the universe as we up-level our own individual consciousness. We can know God more deeply and reveal an experience of inclusion in our lives and communities when we have good self-awareness and awareness of others. There are 3 points that I would like to share with you this morning. The first one is we are a multitude, meaning each person contains a myriad of identities, some that I've highlighted earlier in this talk. When we try to pin down or capture any one qualifier, that's where we get into trouble because we are a multiplicity. We transform our lives through just the process of living and interacting with each other, one experience at a time, and we have millions of experiences throughout our lifespan. Sometimes we are conditioned to acknowledge pieces of our identity more prominently than other aspects of ourselves. However, this may show up for each one of us individually. We know that I know that there are certain aspects of me that will show up. And I was thinking about this. Friends of mine have told me that I carry my expressions on my face. And they said, never sit down at a poker table because you will give away the whole thing, just by your facial expressions. So I know that that's a quality of me that I am consciously aware of. And sometimes I put on the cheerleader smile, and sometimes the cheerleader smile just does not come through. So that's one aspect of me that I recognize that is just a place of awareness. And there are other aspects of ourselves that we may not be aware of. And so we may be forced to move into places of discomfort, our own individual personal discomfort. We repress some parts of our relationship. And when we repress those, we repress the relationship with our emotions. We repress our history. We repress our cultural identity, our gender identities, our journeys with mental health, all at the risk of our well-being and wholeness. Now, I must admit that the world of effect, if you will, does not always make it safe for us to express our true authenticity. However, as we build community, as we come together in gatherings like this, in our spiritual communities, as we set a conscious intention to break down those artificial barriers that have been erected, it's where that safe container is created for us to express the authenticity of who we are, and it be received in unconditional love, be received without judgment. And quite often, just merely talking about something that is going on with us individually brings about the solution. We don't need to go to the advice counselor. We don't need to go to the therapist. And I am not discounting those modes. Ernest Holmes says, if you need a doctor, if you need medicine, go get the medicine. Um, so we learn to identify what is going to support us and allow us to work through these situations that are in our lives. It's valuable to look at these things and to integrate and celebrate the totality of who we are. Yeah. In prior talks, I've invited us to be an observer of ourselves. And so I've identified something that I call the laboratory of me. So I want you to bookmark this phrase, the laboratory of me, because we're going to come back to it a little bit later. By going into the laboratory of me and being gentle with myself, I discover those parts of myself that have been repressed and also begin claiming and healing my unique journey and identity. And I just want to pause here. Those of you who may be familiar with Zoom, I have put into the chat box the life exercise pattern, our life work assignment. I call it life work assignment. In our Wealthy Mind class, Reverend Kathleen is giving us homework. I'm going to offer us life work. So the assignment is in there, and when we come, if you want to take a few minutes now to write it down or not, it's okay. But it's and I was in meditation one morning, and Spirit just revealed these words, the laboratory of me. And I go, wow, the laboratory of me. And I was thinking about what it is that we do when we go into a laboratory. It's a place for us to examine, to put under a microscope, to do our research, to do the discovery, and then to take those results and apply those results to whatever the experience is or the journey is that brought us into the laboratory. It's powerful to claim and identify our gifts. We are beloved, and we are a blessing to this world. And Dr. Howard Thurman, in his book, Meditations of the Heart, offers this comment. There is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the sound of your genuine self. It is the only true guide you will ever have. And if you cannot hear it, you will all of your life spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else is pulling. And that's just another way of saying, as I go into this laboratory of me, I identify what is waiting inside of me, what in my genuine self is waiting to come forward and to guide me. And if I don't listen, if I don't observe who I am, then I will spend all of my days on the ends of strings, like a puppet, on the ends of strings that somebody else's pulls. That's no fun. The second point is seeing ourselves more clearly. When we see ourselves more clearly, we can celebrate who we are, and it often becomes easier with the help of trusted friends, colleagues, family, spiritual community, members of therapists, to begin to see where we might have picked up on some subconscious biases along the way. As humans, we understand that the way our brains work is to tend towards categorizing people and experiences. I heard a very wise practitioner say at one point, put labels on cans, not on people. But our human mind is so quick to put a label on an individual. We are quick to label our ethnic origins. We put ourselves into these categories. We label our gender identity. We label the experiences of life. We label the neighborhoods that we live in. We label the types of cars that we drive. Whatever the experience is in life, we tend to put a label on that, and that becomes an artificial identifier. And so that brings us back to the question, our overarching question for this morning, who are we? Who really are we? And the answer is, we're emanations of the divine. Thomas Merton shares these words with us. The beginning of love is the will to let those we love be perfectly themselves. The resolution not to twist them to fit our image. In loving them, we do not love what they are, but only their potential likeness to ourselves. Then we do not love them. We only love the reflection of ourselves we find in them. Just think about that for a moment. What we identify as love is in another person is really a reflection of the love that we find in ourselves. And so as we expand our own individual capacity to love, we extend the capacity to see the love in others, to see the unique qualities of others. We let go of biases that are apparent to us, and we let go of those that have been hidden in our subconscious. The third point that I'd like to share with us this morning is awareness. This brings us back to the laboratory of me, or to our introspection and just being an observer. And when I came across this, I remembered that in part of our process and part of our journey, we are called to practice self-forgiveness and also forgiveness of others. And so I saw this little story that I'd like to share with you. And it's titled Forgiving Others. The preacher's Sunday morning sermon was on forgiving your enemies. And towards the end of the service, he asked the congregation, how many of you have forgiven your enemies? About half of the people raised their hands. He then repeated the question, and since it was past lunchtime, the second time around, about 80% of the congregation held up their hands and said that yes, they had forgiven their enemies. Then he repeated the question again, and all responded except one little elderly lady. Mrs. Jones, inquired the preacher, are you not willing to forgive some of your enemies? And she replied smilingly, I don't have any enemies. Mrs. Jones, the minister responded, that is very unusual. How old are you? 93, she replied. He says, oh, Mrs. Jones, what a blessing and a lesson for all of us who are here. Would you please come down in front of the congregation and tell us how a person can live 93 years and not have an enemy in the world? And so she joyfully strutted down to the stage with lots of pride, and she stood and faced the congregation and said, I've outlived all the old hags. And so in seeing ourselves more clearly, we are also invited to be aware that awareness is a tool. And this is the third point, awareness is a tool. Self-awareness is an extraordinary tool in putting inclusion into action. Because when we become self-aware, there is a much greater opportunity for healing. You know, and like Mrs. Jones, we don't need to live 93 years. We don't need to outlive those other individuals, those so-called enemies. What we are called to do is outlive those negative thoughts that occupy our mind, that negativity that rests in the subconsciousness. Putting inclusion into action, we become self-aware that there's a greater opportunity for healing, for expressing our genuine truth, for claiming beauty and power, for becoming aware of our biases that we might understand how to play into our beliefs and our behavior. Healing cannot happen without honest inquiry into self. Again, we're going back to the laboratory of me and discovering, who are we? Who am I? When we're willing to do this, it is important to keep building the practice and to be aware that the ultimate goal is to love people exactly for who they are. We do this by loving ourselves for exactly for who we are. Because when we see others, we see the reflection of ourselves. And there's the answer to, who are we? We are a reflection of each other. And my newest friend and meditation teacher and just overall wonderful being on the planet, Justin Michael Williams, in his book, Stay Woke, a meditation guide for the rest of us, writes these words: real change is not just about what you do, it's about who you are. Real change is not about what you do, but about who you are. Commit to a practice of self-reflection, specifically about inclusion in action. Recognize opportunities. Recognize that oftentimes what we do to ourselves is what the system has done to us. Recognize that oftentimes what we do to others is what the system has done to us. And that system is our thoughts. You know, in our Science of Mind teachings, we teach that the enemy, those enemy thoughts are not outside. There's not a devil outside. Those enemy thoughts are those dream stealers that reside within the very being of who we are. And so our call to action that's going to lead to our life work assignment is to be brave and explore our identities through diversity of thought, background, and sentiment in all of their complexity and all of their complexities and splendor. Look at what is asking for some healing in our lives. What is being called forward for healing in our own individual lives? Let's kindly, very gently, and at the same time boldly explore our individual subconscious biases. The work of coming to know and to love the self is the work of coming to know and to be able to actually see other people and love them for who they are. And this is our divine task. Dr. Howard Thurman, in his book, I think the book is For the Inward Journey. He writes this: meet the people where they are. See each one exactly where they are. And this is the key. And see them where they can be. And so that is our call as spiritual truth seekers, as spiritual truth knowers, to meet everyone exactly where they are, to meet them in consciousness where they are, and to see them where they can be, to see the higher. And in seeing the highest in someone else, we're calling forth the highest in ourselves, to see higher. The act of being awake to the truth that the soul of our universe is our soul too. And we have a reminder of this from the scriptures in the book of Exodus, the 3rd chapter and the 14th verse. And I'm sharing this from the Good News Translation. God said, I am who I am. You must tell them, the one who is called I am has sent you. And Dr. Holmes in the Science of Mind textbook on page 374, paragraph 2, writes this: the I am is both individual and universal. So we are both universal and individual. We are inclusion in action. Remember, I asked you earlier to bookmark the phrase, the laboratory in me. And so here's your life work assignment. In your journal, write what reveals itself as you ask this question. What parts of me have I been repressing? And am I willing to begin claiming and healing so that I may experience my unique journey and identity? What parts of me have I been repressing and am now willing to commit to begin healing, to begin claiming and healing? I have to claim them first. We have to acknowledge what it is. We have to identify what it is before we can bring the healing part. So that I may experience this unique journey and of authenticity with my true identity. And remember to be gentle with yourself and to allow the answers to emerge from within. And so let us pray together. Good and gracious Spirit, loving God Almighty, the one life, the one power, the one presence, that which is called by many names and yet is beyond all names. It is into this awareness that I acknowledge my oneness with the entirety of God, the entirety of all life. And as I acknowledge and affirm this for myself, I acknowledge and affirm it for each person that is on this call, as well as those who will be sharing this message via the audio recording. And for the lives that will be transformed, our inner lives that will be transformed by the renewing of our mind, by the knowing, by the revealing, by the taking time to move into that place of being truth seekers as well as truth knowers. And so I speak a word of gratitude and blessing for our time together, knowing that the prayer requests that we hold within our hearts, those prayer requests that we may share with a practitioner or with a prayer partner, are already answered yes in the mind of this loving Spirit. And so whatever it is that we are requesting, I am declaring that the demonstration is appearing right here and right now as we release all of these concerns into the law, which always says yes. And so in gratitude for this and so much more, I lovingly send forth my word, and I send forth the collective word, knowing that the word is a power unto the law, and it must produce what has been declared. And so I release this now and just allow it to be. And I invite you to affirm it with me as we say it together, and so it is.